20 years ago, an innocent man was sent to prison for a murder he didn't commit. The world forgot about him. But he never forgot the man who destroyed his life. For 20 years, he waited. He learned. He planned. And when he finally walked out of prison, a billionaire's empire began to collapse. The rain was falling hard that night. Cold drops slammed against the concrete walls of Blackridge State Prison, one of the most feared prisons in America. Thunder rolled across the sky like distant explosions. Inside cell 214 sat a man who hadn't slept properly in 20 years. His name was Daniel Hayes. The prison guards called him Ghost. Not because he was dangerous, but because he barely spoke, barely moved, barely existed. Most prisoners counted the days. Daniel counted something else. Opportunities. For 20 years he had watched the world through steel bars. 20 years of silence. 20 years of pain. 20 years of planning. And tonight, everything was about to change. 20 years earlier, Daniel Hayes had been a completely different man. He wasn't a prisoner. He wasn't broken. He wasn't silent. He was just a normal man living a quiet life in Chicago. Daniel worked as a senior accountant for a powerful construction company owned by billionaire Victor Langford. Victor Langford was a legend in the business world. News channels called him a visionary. Magazines called him a genius. Politicians called him a friend. But Daniel Hayes was the man who handled the numbers. And numbers never lie. One evening Daniel stayed late at the office reviewing financial records. The building was quiet. Everyone had already gone home. Only the soft humming of computers filled the dark office. Daniel was about to leave when something strange caught his eye. A transfer. $5 million. Sent to an offshore account. At first Daniel assumed it was normal business. But then he noticed something disturbing. There was no contract. No invoice. No explanation. Just money, disappearing. Daniel frowned and opened more files. Another transfer. Then another. Then another. Millions of dollars moving through secret accounts like invisible rivers. Daniel's heart started beating faster. He realized something terrifying. This wasn't accounting. This was money laundering. For the next 3 hours Daniel searched deeper into the system. The truth slowly revealed itself like a nightmare unfolding. Victor Langford's company was hiding billions of dollars. Illegal payments. Political bribes. Fake construction contracts. And someone had carefully built the system to hide it all. But they had made one mistake. Daniel Hayes had found it. Daniel sat in the silent office staring at the screen. His mind was racing. He knew reporting this could destroy Victor Langford. But ignoring it would make him part of the crime. Daniel had always believed in doing the right thing. Even when it was dangerous. So he made a decision. A decision that would destroy his life. The next morning Daniel contacted a government financial investigator. A man named Thomas Reed. Reed was known for exposing corruption. Daniel told him everything. The secret accounts. The illegal transfers. The hidden companies. Reed listened carefully. Then he said something that made Daniel uneasy. You did the right thing. But men like Victor Langford don't fall easily. 2 days later, Thomas Reed was dead. He was found in his apartment. Shot once in the chest. The news spread across the city like wildfire. And somehow, Daniel Hayes became the prime suspect. The police arrived at Daniel's apartment before sunrise. They broke down the door. Daniel barely had time to understand what was happening. They searched the apartment. And then they found it. A gun. Hidden in Daniel's kitchen drawer. The same gun that killed Thomas Reed. Daniel stared in disbelief. "That's not mine." But the police didn't listen. Because the gun had Daniel's fingerprints. Within hours the news media had already decided the story. Accountant murders investigator. Daniel watched the headlines from inside a police interrogation room. His hands were shaking. His entire world was collapsing. But the worst moment came during the trial. Because the star witness was none other than Victor Langford. Victor walked into court wearing a perfect black suit. Calm. Confident. Untouchable. He looked at Daniel with fake sadness. Then he told the jury a story. A story about an unstable employee. A man obsessed with money. A man angry at the company. A man capable of murder. Every word was a lie. But lies sound powerful when spoken by billionaires. Daniel's lawyer tried to defend him. But the evidence was overwhelming. The gun. The fingerprints. Witnesses who claimed Daniel had been acting strange. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. Then the judge spoke the words that ended Daniel's life. "Daniel Hayes, you are sentenced to life imprisonment." That was the day Daniel Hayes disappeared from the world. But prison didn't kill him. Not immediately. Instead, it changed him. The first year in prison was hell. Daniel fought constantly. Other inmates saw him as weak. Guards treated him like garbage. Every night he replayed the trial in his head. Every lie. Every betrayal. Especially Victor Langford's smile. Daniel wanted revenge. But revenge inside prison is impossible. Unless you learn patience. And Daniel Hayes learned patience better than anyone. Because prison is a strange place. Inside those walls you meet people society has forgotten. Hackers. Master thieves. Lawyers who ruined their lives. Men who understood systems. And Daniel listened. For years. He learned how hackers break into networks. He learned how lawyers manipulate the law. He learned how criminals hide money. Every skill Victor Langford used. Daniel slowly mastered. Outside the prison walls, Victor Langford's empire grew bigger. His company became worth billions. He appeared on television. Gave motivational speeches. People called him a self-made legend. But Victor Langford had one secret buried deep in his past. A secret sitting quietly in cell 214. Daniel Hayes. Years passed. 10 years. 15 years. 20 years. And something unexpected finally happened. A new prosecutor reviewed Daniel's case. Small mistakes appeared in the investigation. Evidence that seemed too perfect. The court ordered a review. Then suddenly, Daniel Hayes walked out of prison. After 20 years. The media called it a tragic mistake. But Daniel didn't speak to reporters. He didn't complain. He didn't cry. Because Daniel Hayes had not spent 20 years waiting for freedom. He had spent 20 years preparing for revenge. Meanwhile, Victor Langford received a phone call that night. His assistant sounded nervous. "Sir. Daniel Hayes has been released." Victor went silent. For the first time in 20 years. Fear touched his heart. But then he laughed. What can a broken man do? Victor Langford had no idea. The real game had just begun. The city of Chicago looked the same. The same busy streets. The same tall buildings. The same noise of traffic and people rushing through their lives. But for Daniel Hayes, everything felt different. Because the last time he had walked freely through these streets, the world had betrayed him. 20 years had changed the city. But Daniel had changed even more. The first thing Daniel did after leaving prison was disappear. No interviews. No public appearances. No social media. To the world, Daniel Hayes simply vanished. But behind the silence, the plan had already begun. Victor Langford sat in his massive glass office on the top floor of Langford Global Headquarters. The building overlooked the entire city skyline. It was a symbol of power, success, control. Victor liked control. He believed he controlled everything. Money, people, politics. But there was one thing Victor couldn't control anymore. Daniel Hayes. At first, Victor tried to ignore the news. After all, 20 years was a long time. People change. Maybe prison had broken Daniel. Maybe he just wanted to rebuild his life. Victor convinced himself there was nothing to worry about. But 3 weeks later, something strange happened. The first problem appeared inside Victor's company network. A minor security alert. Nothing serious. Just a failed login attempt on a private financial server. The IT department fixed it quickly. Victor barely noticed. But the next day, it happened again. Then again. And again. Someone was testing the system. Quietly. Patiently. Learning. Victor's head of cybersecurity, Mark Benson, assured him everything was under control. "We'll find whoever it is," Mark said confidently. But Mark didn't know something important. The person attacking the system had spent 20 years learning how people like Mark think. And how they fail. Across the city, Daniel sat in a small apartment filled with computer screens. The room was dark. Only the glow of monitors illuminated his face. Lines of code moved across the screens. Financial data. Security systems. Company servers. Every digital wall Victor Langford had built. Daniel was slowly walking through them. Like a ghost. But Daniel wasn't trying to steal money. Money wasn't the goal. Destruction was. One evening Victor hosted a large business dinner with investors and politicians. Everything was perfect. Luxury restaurant. Expensive wine. Powerful people. Victor stood up to give a speech. He smiled confidently. "Ladies and gentlemen, the future of Langford Global has never been brighter." But at that exact moment, everyone's phones buzzed. One by one. The room filled with confused whispers. Victor frowned. Then his own phone vibrated. He looked down. And his blood turned cold. Because the message contained a leaked financial document. One of Victor's secret offshore accounts. The room exploded with questions. "Victor, what is this? Is this real?" Victor forced a calm smile. It must be fake information. But deep inside, he knew exactly what it was. Someone had found the secrets. And there was only one man patient enough to do it. Daniel Hayes. The next morning the news channels exploded. Journalists were asking questions about Victor's hidden money. Government regulators began investigating. Victor's lawyers worked non-stop trying to contain the damage. But Daniel wasn't finished. Not even close. Over the next few weeks more leaks appeared. Secret contracts. Bribes. Illegal payments to politicians. Each leak was perfectly timed. Never too much. Never too little. Just enough to slowly destroy Victor's reputation. Victor grew paranoid. He increased security everywhere. New cybersecurity teams. Private investigators. Even former intelligence agents. But none of them could find Daniel. Because Daniel wasn't attacking like a criminal. He was attacking like a strategist. Every move had been planned for 20 years. Then something happened that truly terrified Victor. One night he returned to his penthouse after a long meeting. Everything looked normal. The lights were on. The room was quiet. But when Victor walked into his office, he saw something on his desk. An envelope. No security alarms had been triggered. No guards had seen anyone enter. Yet the envelope was there, waiting. Victor slowly opened it. Inside was a single photograph. A picture from 20 years ago. The day of Daniel Hayes' trial. And written across the photo were 4 simple words. I remember everything. Victor's hands began to shake. For the first time in his life, Victor Langford felt hunted. Because somewhere in the city, a man he had destroyed was watching him, studying him, waiting. But Daniel Hayes still wasn't ready to finish the game. Because revenge is not about speed. Revenge is about patience. And Daniel Hayes had already proven he could wait 20 years. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening inside Victor's company. Several senior executives suddenly resigned. Some disappeared. Others began cooperating with investigators. Victor's empire was starting to crack from the inside. And Victor realized something horrifying. Daniel wasn't just exposing crimes. He was turning people against him. Late one night, Victor finally received the call he had been dreading. A calm voice spoke through the phone. Hello, Victor. Victor's heart nearly stopped. He recognized the voice immediately. Daniel. Silence filled the line. Then Daniel spoke again. His voice was quiet, cold, controlled. Do you remember the day you destroyed my life? Victor tried to sound confident. That was 20 years ago. Daniel replied slowly. For you, maybe. For me, it was yesterday. Victor clenched the phone tightly. What do you want? There was a long pause. Then Daniel said something terrifying. I want you to feel time the way I felt it. Slowly. Painfully. Every single day. And then the call ended. Victor Langford stood alone in his penthouse. Sweat on his forehead. Fear in his chest. Because for the first time in his life, he realized something. Daniel Hayes wasn't just seeking revenge. He was destroying Victor's entire world. Piece by piece. And the worst part, the real attack, hadn't even started yet. Victor Langford had not slept properly in weeks. Every night felt longer. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every phone call made his heart race. For 20 years he had believed the past was buried. But the past had returned. And it had a name. Daniel Hayes. Victor's empire was collapsing. Investigations surrounded his company. Government agencies were digging into financial records. Journalists were publishing new leaks almost every day. His business partners were abandoning him. Investors were pulling their money. The stock price of Langford Global was falling like a crashing airplane. But Victor refused to believe he had lost. Men like Victor Langford didn't lose. They fought. Victor hired one of the most powerful private investigation firms in the country. Their mission was simple. Find Daniel Hayes. Stop him. No matter the cost. For weeks the investigators searched. They followed digital trails. They traced financial movements. They interviewed old prison contacts. And finally, they found something. A small apartment building on the edge of Chicago. The investigators believed Daniel was hiding there. Victor ordered them to bring him in. Immediately. That night 2 black SUVs stopped outside the building. 4 men quietly entered the hallway. They moved toward the apartment door. One of them knocked. No response. They forced the door open. The apartment was dark. Empty. Except for one thing. A laptop sitting on the table. Still running. The screen suddenly lit up. And a video began to play. Daniel Hayes appeared on the screen. Calm. Serious. Prepared. The men froze as Daniel spoke. "Hello, Victor. I knew you would eventually find this place. But you're too late. This apartment was never my home. It was only a message." The video cut to financial documents appearing on the screen. Bank transfers. Secret contracts. Illegal deals. Daniel continued speaking. "For 20 years I studied everything you built. Every company. Every account. Every crime. And now the entire world is about to see it." At that exact moment across the country, every major news outlet received a massive data leak. Thousands of documents. Emails. Video recordings. Proof of corruption on a scale no one had ever imagined. Victor Langford's entire empire was exposed in a single night. The next morning the news exploded. Billionaire businessmen linked to massive corruption network. Langford Global under federal investigation. Former employees confessed to illegal activities. Victor Langford watched the television in disbelief. The reporters were tearing his empire apart. Years of secrets. Gone. But the worst moment came that afternoon. Federal agents arrived at Langford Global headquarters. Armed with arrest warrants. They searched every office. Confiscated every computer. Victor's lawyers tried to stop them. But it was useless. The evidence was overwhelming. Victor sat alone in his office when the phone rang. He already knew who it was. He slowly answered. "Daniel." The voice on the other end remained calm. "Yes." Victor's voice trembled with anger. "You think you've won?" Daniel replied quietly. "No. This isn't winning. This is balance." Victor slammed his hand on the desk. "You ruined everything." Daniel paused for a moment. Then he said something Victor would never forget. "You ruined everything first. 20 years ago." Days later Victor Langford stood in the same courtroom where Daniel Hayes had once been sentenced. The room was packed with journalists. Cameras flashed constantly. The judge looked down at Victor with cold eyes. The charges were devastating. Fraud. Money laundering. Bribery. Conspiracy. And finally, murder. Because new witnesses had come forward. Former employees who confessed the truth. Victor Langford had ordered the murder of investigator Thomas Reed. And Daniel Hayes had been the perfect scapegoat. The judge spoke slowly. "Victor Langford. You are sentenced to life imprisonment." Gasps filled the courtroom. Victor Langford collapsed into his chair. His empire. His wealth. His power. Gone. Outside the courthouse reporters searched everywhere for Daniel Hayes. But he never appeared. No interviews. No statements. Nothing. It was as if he had vanished again. Weeks later Victor Langford sat inside a cold prison cell. The same type of cell Daniel had lived in for 20 years. The walls were gray. The air was silent. And for the first time in his life, Victor understood what time felt like in prison. Slow. Heavy. Endless. That night a guard walked past Victor's cell and stopped. "There's a letter for you." Victor grabbed the envelope. His hands shaking. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Only one sentence was written on it. "Now you understand." No signature. But Victor knew exactly who had sent it. Daniel Hayes. Far away from the city, a man stood quietly near the ocean watching the sunset. The wind moved softly through the air. Daniel Hayes took a deep breath. For the first time in 20 years, he felt free. Not because Victor Langford was in prison, But because the truth had finally been heard. Justice had taken 20 years. But it had arrived. And somewhere inside a dark prison cell, Victor Langford began counting the days. Just like Daniel Hayes once did.